Before Eleanor Whitaker was forced to eat in the kitchen like a servant, she had cooked the entire meal for the people, preparing to throw her out. She had been awake before sunrise in the old Whitaker kitchen, moving quietly between the stove and the pantry, while the rest of the house sat in the damp, heavy silence of morning. Harold had been gone for 5 days. His cardigan still hung over the back of his dining room chair. His reading glasses still rested beside the salt cellar. Eleanor had not moved them because some grief is too sacred to tidy away too soon, so she cooked around it. She made the roast the way Grant liked it, trimmed lean because he always complained about fat. She made Peter's wife a separate dish without almonds. She baked Marianne's favorite lemon pound cake, though Marianne had not said thank you for anything. Eleanor made in nearly 12 years. She set aside a bowl of soft peaches for Daniel, Marianne's youngest son, because when he was 12, he once whispered that hard fruit hurt his teeth after braces. No one in the family remembered that. Eleanor did. By 2:30, the dining room was perfect. Polished silver, folded napkins, water glasses catching the pale afternoon light. 12 chairs around the walnut table. Eleanor set her own place beside Harold's empty chair. Not at the head, never there, just beside him. The way she had sat through 19 years of marriage, close enough to notice when his hand trembled, close enough to hear when his breath changed, close enough to understand when pain had made him too proud to ask for help. At 3 o'clock, Harold's family arrived. Marianne entered first, in a black dress that looked less like mourning than command. She scanned the table, the food, the flowers, the extra place beside Harold's chair. Then she looked at Eleanor. "You used the good silver." Eleanor said calmly that Harold liked it used on family days. Marianne's mouth tightened. "This is a legal meeting, Eleanor, not one of your little kitchen performances." Grant and Peter came in behind her, with their wives. Their adult children followed, quieter and more uneasy. Mr. Calloway, the family lawyer, arrived last with Harold's will folder held tightly under one arm. The family moved toward the dining room. Eleanor followed. She had taken only 2 steps when Marianne turned and lifted Eleanor's plate from the table. Not gently, not accidentally. She picked it up in front of everyone and handed it to one of the grandchildren. "Put this in the kitchen." No one spoke. Eleanor looked at the empty space beside Harold's chair. Marianne smiled as if she had just corrected a table setting, not erased a wife. "There's food for you by the sink." Daniel, now 26, took a step forward. Marianne saw it instantly. "Daniel, don't start." The young man stopped, but his face changed. Eleanor saw the shame in him. He was not ashamed of her. He was ashamed that he had obeyed. Marianne turned back to Eleanor. "Family should sit together today." Eleanor could have said she was family. She could have raised her hand and shown the wedding ring Harold had placed there 19 years earlier. She could have pointed to the legal folder under Mr. Calloway's arm. Instead, she waited. That patience irritated Marianne more than anger would have, so Marianne cut deeper. "And after we eat, please clear the plates before Mr. Calloway reads." My father hated a messy room. The cruelty landed slowly. A widow, in her own home, asked to serve and clean before hearing her husband's will. Peter looked down. Grant pretended not to hear. Ellis, Marianne's husband, gave a small laugh through his nose. Marianne stepped close enough that only the front half of the room could hear clearly. "My father pitied you." Don't confuse that with belonging. Eleanor's face remained still, but something in the room shifted. Even the people who disliked her seemed to understand that a line had been crossed. Mr. Calloway cleared his throat. Harold's instruction was that Mrs. Whitaker be present at the table. Marianne did not turn around. Harold gave many instructions when she was standing close enough to guide his hand. There it was. The old accusation, dressed as concern. Eleanor had controlled him. Eleanor had isolated him. Eleanor had turned a father against his children. Eleanor had married a lonely older man and waited for the house. Marianne reached into her purse and removed a cream-colored envelope. She placed it on the sideboard near Eleanor. "This is for you, a reasonable settlement. Clothes, your car, 6 months of living expenses, and no contest." Sign it after dinner and we can all avoid embarrassment. Eleanor looked at the envelope. Then she looked at the crooked leg of the old serving table. It had wobbled since winter, and Harold had always meant to fix it. She picked up Marianne's envelope, folded it once, slid it beneath the short table leg, and steadied the table with it. At least it is useful now, Eleanor said. For the first time that afternoon, Marianne lost color. Not because the line was loud, because it was not. Eleanor walked into the kitchen. Her plate was beside the sink, covered with a paper towel, cold roast. No gravy, no fork, only a serving spoon. The dishes from the family's first round of food had already begun collecting near the counter. Marianne had done it deliberately. Eleanor knew that. They had wanted her to hear the will while washing the plates of those who had taken her chair. So Eleanor washed, slowly, one plate, one glass, one silver knife. The sound carried through the house, water running, china tapping. The widow cleaning while her husband's children prepared to divide his life. From the dining room, Marianne's voice rose. Before the will is read, this family needs the record to show our concern. Eleanor was first paid to help my father. Then she married him. Then she controlled the house. Then she changed the locks. And near the end, she kept him from us. Peter added that there had been photographs. Grant said there had been missing money. Ellis said vulnerable men were easy to influence. Eleanor turned off the faucet. In the sudden quiet, Marianne said the filthiest sentence of the day. She made our father die, believing we abandoned him. Eleanor dried her hands on the towel. Then she reached into the pocket of her black dress. Her fingers closed around the old brass key Harold had pressed into her palm 3 nights before. He died. His voice had been weak then, but his eyes had been clear. Do not use it when they insult you. Do not use it when they lie. Use it only when they make you small enough for the kitchen. At the time, Eleanor had thought grief and morphine had made him dramatic. Now she understood. Harold had known exactly what kind of room his family would become when he was no longer there to shame them. Eleanor moved 3 flour tins from the bottom pantry shelf. Behind them sat a chipped blue plate, plain and old, the one Harold had loved more than the crystal his children fought over. Behind the plate was a narrow wooden panel. She fitted the brass key into a lock no one knew existed. The click cut through Marianne's speech. In the dining room, every voice stopped. Eleanor opened the hidden safe in the kitchen wall. Marianne reached the kitchen first. She came fast, almost triumphant, as if catching Eleanor at a secret lock proved every accusation at once. What is that? Eleanor did not answer. Inside the safe were 6 sealed envelopes, a black velvet ring box, 2 funeral programs, a stack of medical bills, a yellow diner receipt, a private investigator's photograph, and 1 thick packet marked in Harold's handwriting. If she is in the kitchen, read before the will. Grant appeared behind Marianne. Peter followed. Ellis stood near the doorway, his confidence fading for the first time. The grandchildren gathered silently. Mr. Calloway came last, and the moment he saw the packet, his face became old. Eleanor noticed. This was not surprise. It was guilt. Marianne pointed at the safe. That is not in the estate inventory. Mr. Calloway stepped forward. It is now. Grant snapped that nobody knew who put those papers there. Peter said Eleanor had access to the house. Ellis said hidden evidence was exactly what manipulative people used when honest families were grieving. The words came quickly, too quickly, as if they had rehearsed them. That was when Eleanor understood something important. The cruelty at the table had not been only emotional. It had been strategy. They wanted her angry. They wanted her shaking. They wanted her to look unstable in front of the lawyer. Marianne had not simply sent her to the kitchen because she hated her. She had sent her there because she needed Eleanor to break. Mr. Calloway opened the thick packet. Before he read, Marianne said, "I object to this." The lawyer looked at her. "This is not a courtroom." "No," Marianne said. "It is my father's home." Eleanor finally turned. "It was your father's home," she said. "It was my husband's home. And today you made it a place where his wife had to wash your dishes before hearing his last words." That landed. Marianne's eyes hardened because the room heard the truth too clearly. Mr. Calloway began reading. Harold's first sentence was simple. If Eleanor is hearing this from the kitchen, then the test has ended. No one breathed. Grant asked what test. Mr. Calloway continued. Harold wrote that he had created 2 versions of his final estate plan. One generous, one guarded. If his family welcomed Eleanor to the table, respected her as his wife, and allowed the will reading to proceed without false accusations, the generous plan would stand. His children would inherit significant shares. The business would remain under family control. Marianne would have authority over the family foundation. Grant and Peter would receive ownership interests after normal review. Daniel's trust would be restored privately. Eleanor would have lifetime protection in the house. But if his family shamed Eleanor, sent her away from the table, tried to force her to sign papers, repeated the old accusations, or treated her like a servant in the home where she had cared for him, the guarded plan would activate. The room went still in a different way now, not offended, afraid. Eleanor looked at Marianne. Marianne's lips parted slightly, and in that tiny reaction Eleanor saw the hidden truth. Marianne had known, not everything, but enough. She had known there was a condition. She had known Harold had left some kind of moral trap. She had believed the trap was meant for Eleanor. She believed if Eleanor lost control, cried, shouted, grabbed, threatened, or looked greedy, the family could prove Harold had been manipulated by an unstable woman. So Marianne had built the afternoon like a furnace. Remove the chair, serve her by the sink, make her wash dishes, call her a paid companion, wave money in her face, mention the alleged affair, accuse her of poisoning Harold against his children, push until the widow broke. But Harold had not been testing Eleanor. He had been testing them. Daniel said it first. He knew you would do this. Marianne turned on him. Daniel did not move. For years, he had obeyed that tone. Not today. Mr. Calloway, read the next page. Harold wrote about the blue plate. His grandmother had fed hungry men on it during hard winters. Not because they were family, not because they could repay her, because hunger and shame should not be served together. He wrote that every person who entered the Whitaker kitchen in need had once been protected by that plate. Then he wrote that Eleanor had been served on it during her first Thanksgiving in the house, after Marianne decided the good china was for family. Eleanor remembered the day. She had pretended not to understand the insult. Harold had understood. Harold always understood more than he said. The first envelope was marked funeral. Inside were 2 printed programs from Harold's service. The first one listed Vivian, Harold's first wife, as beloved wife. Eleanor was named only as longtime companion, a companion after 19 years of marriage. The second program was corrected, listing Eleanor properly as Harold's wife. Mr. Calloway read a statement from the church secretary. Marianne had submitted the first version and insisted that listing Eleanor as wife would confuse guests and upset the family. Daniel stared at his mother. Grant whispered, "Marianne." She did not answer. Eleanor felt the old pain rise. At the funeral, she had not made a scene. She had simply shown the church office her marriage certificate and asked for the truth to be printed. Marianne had later told everyone Eleanor humiliated the family over wording. Now the wording had become evidence. Harold's note beneath the programs read, "If they try to make Eleanor a footnote at my funeral, let the record show she was the last chapter of my life." Eleanor's eyes filled, but she did not cry. Marianne looked away first. The second envelope was marked photographs. Peter's face changed. He knew what was inside before anyone else. Mr. Calloway removed a glossy photograph. Eleanor stood beside a grey sedan behind a medical clinic, speaking to a man in a dark coat. From the angle, it looked secretive, intimate, if someone wanted it to. Peter said quickly, "That proves what we said." Mr. Calloway turned the photo over. On the back was Harold's handwriting. This is the photograph they used to accuse my wife of adultery. The man beside her was buying her land so she could pay for my care. The room tightened. A land sale contract was attached. Same date, same man, same location. Eleanor had sold the last 10 acres of her parents' farm from the final piece of her own past to cover Harold's specialist care when one of his accounts was frozen by a legal dispute caused by Peter's tax trouble. Peter's wife looked at him. "You knew?" Peter did not answer. That was answer enough. Eleanor remembered the day of the photograph. She had come home with the signed papers in her purse and mud on her shoes. Harold had been asleep in his recliner. She had made soup and never told him until months later. Harold had found out. He always found out. Marianne still tried to hold the room. She chose to sell that land. No one forced her. Eleanor finally gave her a look with no softness left. "No, you only forced him to need it." That line changed the temperature of the kitchen. Marianne's cruelty had always depended on Eleanor staying gentle. Now Eleanor was not cruel, but she was done being useful to their lies. The third envelope was marked money. Grant stepped back before it opened. The record showed what Harold had paid for in the last decade. Grant's business losses, Peter's tax penalties, Marianne's private legal settlement after missing funds in a charity account she chaired. Ellis's company rescued through a consulting contract that had never required a single consultation. Every person in the room had taken Harold's money. Every one of them had later suggested Eleanor was the thief. Mr. Calloway read dates aloud. The dates mattered. On several of the exact days, Marianne claimed Eleanor had kept Harold from his children. Harold had been signing emergency transfers to those same children. Eleanor had not blocked access. She had mailed checks for people who later called her greedy. Grant covered his face. Peter stared at the floor. Marianne's jaw worked as if she were chewing glass. Ellis made a final attempt to regain control. He said family finances were complicated. He said Harold liked helping his children. He said Eleanor had no right to expose private matters. Eleanor listened. Then she reached to the counter, picked up the settlement envelope Marianne had given her, and placed it on the kitchen table. "You were willing to pay me 6 months of expenses to disappear," she said. "Do not lecture me about privacy." Ellis's face reddened. The fourth envelope was marked locks. This one cut in a different way. Peter had accused Eleanor for years of changing the locks to keep the family away. Harold's note told another story. Pain medication had disappeared twice from the upstairs bathroom. Harold had begged Eleanor not to accuse anyone unless she had proof. So she changed the locks quietly, not to keep his children out, but to keep his medicine safe. Inside the envelope were pharmacy replacement forms, a doctor's warning, and a note Harold had written in shaking pen. "I asked her to change the locks. She took the blame because I was too ashamed to ask which of my children had made it necessary." No one spoke. That was one of the ugliest truths, because it did not name the guilty person. It named Harold's heartbreak. Grant said weakly that it could have been a nurse. Eleanor answered without looking at him. There were no outside nurses that week. Grant stopped. His wife stepped away from him. The fifth envelope was marked Daniel. Marianne whispered no. That one word told the whole room that this envelope was real. Daniel stood very still, Mr. Calloway removed an old photograph of Harold with Daniel at 12. The boy looked thin and guarded. Harold's hand rested on his shoulder like a shield. On the back, Harold had written, "For the child they tried to send away." Daniel did not reach for the picture at first. He looked at Eleanor. She remembered the night behind that photograph. Daniel had come into the kitchen shaking after an argument in the study. Harold's voice had been low and furious behind the closed door. Marianne had been crying. Ellis had been cold. Daniel had sat at the kitchen table and asked Eleanor a question no child should have to ask. If someone is born wrong, do they still get to stay? At the time, Eleanor did not know the full truth. She only put soup in front of him on the blue plate. Harold came in later, sat across from Daniel, and said, "No child pays for an adult's shame." Now Daniel finally told the room. Ellis was not his biological father. Marianne had conceived him during a separation she later erased from the family story. Harold had known. Vivian had known. Ellis had agreed publicly to raise Daniel, then privately resented him. When Daniel was 12, Ellis and Marianne discussed sending him away under the cover of behavioral trouble. Not because he was dangerous, because he was evidence. Daniel's voice did not shake when he said it. She never treated me like evidence, he said, looking at Eleanor. She treated me like a hungry kid. Marianne sat down hard. The lie she had built around Eleanor had cracked open and revealed another lie beneath it. Eleanor had not stolen Harold from his family. She had witnessed the family trying to erase its own child. Mr. Calloway read Harold's note attached to Daniel's papers. Daniel's trust was created before Eleanor ever asked me for a thing. It was reduced without his understanding, while he was still too young to know what had been taken. Restore it before any adult in this family receives $1 more from my name. Daniel looked at his mother. You borrowed against it? Marianne's tears came then, but they came too late to soften the fact. Ellis spoke from the doorway. It was temporary. Daniel turned to him. So was childhood. No one recovered from that line. The room stayed frozen until Mr. Calloway opened the final envelope. It was marked "Why I Waited." The lawyer's hands trembled. He admitted Harold had come to him years earlier asking to protect Eleanor and Daniel. Mr. Calloway had delayed, fearing a family challenge. He thought he was being practical. During that delay, Ellis and Peter obtained older drafts and used them to pressure Harold. They threatened to challenge Eleanor as manipulative. They threatened to use the gray sedan photograph. They threatened to drag Daniel's birth into a public dispute. They knew Harold was too sick to bear the thought of Eleanor spending her widowhood in court, defending her marriage from lies. So Harold waited. But he did not wait helplessly. He gathered records. He asked doctors for competency evaluations. He wrote instructions. He built 2 wills. And he left the brass key with Eleanor. The trap had never been for her. It had been for anyone who thought kindness was weakness. Mr. Calloway opened the guarded will. The dining room might as well have vanished. No one cared about the polished table now. The real inheritance was being decided in the kitchen they had used as a weapon. The generous version was described first. If Eleanor had been welcomed and the reading had remained respectful, the children would have received large shares. Marianne would have controlled a family foundation. Grant and Peter would have kept business interests. Ellis would have received a consulting payout Harold had once promised for the sake of family peace. The guarded version was different. The house would remain Eleanor's for life. After her death, it would become a residence and support center for abandoned spouses and family. Caregivers. Grant's inheritance would be reduced by documented business rescues. Peter's by tax penalties and estate interference. Marianne's authority would be removed entirely. She would receive income, but no control over property, records, or Daniel's trust. Ellis would receive nothing. Daniel's trust would be restored first, with interest. Any challenge based on Eleanor's alleged manipulation would automatically release Harold's full evidence file to the court record. Peter went pale. Grant muttered that Harold would never do this. Mr. Calloway placed 3 medical competency letters on the table. 3 doctors, 3 dates, 3 clear findings. Harold knew exactly what he was doing. Marianne looked at the lawyer with hatred. You helped him set this up, Mr. Calloway did not defend himself. Too late, he said, but yes. Then came the final shock. Harold had recorded 1 legal video statement. Mr. Calloway had not planned to play it, unless the family challenged the packet. But Harold's written instruction said that if Eleanor was accused of forging, planting, or manipulating evidence after the kitchen safe was opened, the video must be shown immediately. Marianne had accused her, so the video played, not on a dramatic screen, not like a courtroom movie. On Mr. Calloway's tablet, placed on the kitchen table beside the blue plate. Harold appeared thinner than Eleanor wanted to remember. His cardigan hung loose over his shoulders. His voice was weak but unmistakable. He said he was of sound mind. He said Eleanor had never asked him for money, property, or revenge. He said every document in the kitchen safe had been placed there by his instruction, witnessed and catalogued. Then he stopped, took a breath, and looked directly into the camera. If my family has made Eleanor stand in the kitchen today, then I want them to look around. That room kept me alive. That woman kept me alive. And if you use that room to shame her, You have misunderstood both the house and the man who built a life in it." No one moved. Harold continued. He named Grant's fear. He named Peter's dishonesty. He named Ellis's cruelty. Then he looked as if he was speaking only to Marianne. "My daughter, you were not wrong to miss your mother. You were wrong to punish my wife for not being her." Marianne broke then, not loudly. Her face simply collapsed, as if the structure holding her upright had been removed. Harold's final words were for Eleanor. "If they made you small, Nell, open the wall. If they made you dirty their dishes, let them eat the truth from the blue plate. And when it is over, do not become what they called you. That was never your burden to carry." The video ended. Eleanor stood with one hand on the back of the kitchen chair. For 19 years, she had defended Harold's children to him. She had told him grief takes strange shapes. She had told him absence did not always mean lack of love. She had told him not to die angry. Now Harold had answered from beyond the reach of their pressure. The silence after the video was different from every silence before it. Earlier, the family had been silent because they were embarrassed. Now they were silent because there was nowhere left to hide. Marianne tried to speak Eleanor's name, but she used the wrong one. "Mrs. Lane." Eleanor lifted her head. Lane was her old name, her widow's name from before Harold. Marianne had used it for years when she wanted to pretend the marriage had never really happened. Eleanor removed the wedding ring from her finger. For one awful second, everyone thought she was surrendering it. Instead, she placed it beside Harold's letter. "My name is Eleanor Whitaker," she said. "Your father gave me that name in a church with all of you watching. You do not have the power to take it back." That was the moment the room truly went silent. Not because of money, because Eleanor had finally claimed aloud what they had spent 19 years trying to make feel temporary. Then she made the move no one expected. She took the dirty plates from the sink, one by one, and placed them on the table beside the evidence. Grant's plate, Peter's plate, Marianne's plate, Ellis's glass, the settlement envelope, the false funeral program, the land sale receipt, the photograph, the trust papers, the blue plate in the center. She arranged them like a map of the whole ugly afternoon. Then she looked at Marianne. "You wanted me to clean up after this family one last time," Eleanor said. "So I did." No one answered. Because the mess was finally visible, Ellis tried to leave first. Daniel stepped into the doorway. He did not touch him. He did not threaten him. He simply stood between Ellis and the hall, a grown man facing the person who had made him feel like a mistake since childhood. Daniel asked one question. "When did you stop pretending I was your son?" Ellis's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Daniel nodded once. That early. Then he moved aside. Ellis left without his coat, his consulting payout, or the illusion that silence still protected him. Grant went to the porch and called his wife. At first, he spoke about lawyers and audits. Then his voice broke. Eleanor heard him say Harold's name once, not as a bank account, but as a father. It was not redemption. Not yet. But fear had finally opened a door grief could enter. Peter argued the longest. He threatened court, review, and investigation until Mr. Calloway calmly explained that any challenge would release Harold's full evidence file, including the recorded calls where Peter discussed making Eleanor look unstable enough to slow probate. Peter sat down. All his cleverness had led him to a kitchen table covered in proof. Marianne remained seated before the blue plate. She looked at the false funeral program as if it were a weapon she had not realized she was holding by the blade. Finally, she turned to Daniel. "I was ashamed," she said. Daniel did not soften. "Of me?" Marianne shook her head, crying now without trying to make it graceful. "Of myself. But I made you pay for it." That was the first honest sentence Eleanor had heard from her in years. Daniel did not forgive her. He did not perform healing so the adults could feel better. He only said, "I needed a mother more than you needed a clean story." Marianne covered her face. No one comforted her. That too was consequence. Then she looked at Eleanor. "I hated that he needed you," Marianne said. "I hated that you saw him weak. I hated that when he called for you, he sounded peaceful. I thought if I made you smaller, I could feel like his daughter again." Eleanor listened. There was truth in it. Ugly truth, but truth. "You were always his daughter," Eleanor said. "You just kept acting like love was a room with only one chair." Marianne wept harder. Eleanor did not hug her. Forgiveness given too quickly can become another way of protecting the guilty from understanding what they did. The legal consequences came quietly over the next months. Grant's business accounts were reviewed. Peter's interference with estate documents was documented. Ellis and Marianne separated before summer. Mr. Calloway reported his earlier delay to the proper professional board and accepted the damage. Mrs. Briggs, the former housekeeper, gave a full statement confirming what she had seen. Letters removed, locks questioned, Harold pressured, Eleanor blamed. Eleanor stayed in the house. That surprised them. They expected revenge. They expected locks changed again, gates closed, portraits removed, silver sold. But Eleanor did not want Harold's house as a trophy. She wanted it to stop lying. She changed one rule. No one ate in that house unless every person present had a real chair. The first meal after the will reading was in the kitchen. Eleanor chose it, not because she had been banished there, but because the family needed to learn the difference between a kitchen and humiliation. Daniel came first with flowers wrapped in brown paper. Mrs. Briggs came with a cane and a lopsided lemon cake. Mr. Calloway came for 10 minutes and stayed 2 hours. Marianne arrived last. She stood on the porch holding a covered dish like a woman, unsure whether she still had a name inside the house. Eleanor saw her through the glass. She waited. Then she opened the door. Marianne looked older without control. "I don't expect a place." Eleanor studied her. She saw the woman who had removed her from the funeral program, the daughter who had called her a servant, the mother who had let shame wound her own son. She also saw Harold's child. Broken by grief, she had turned into cruelty. Understanding was not excuse, but it was enough to open the door. "There is a place," Eleanor said, "but not at the head." Marianne nodded. "That's more than I deserve." They ate soup at the kitchen table. No speeches, no instant forgiveness, no pretty ending forced too soon. Daniel passed bread to his mother once. She whispered, "Thank you." He did not answer, but he did not leave. For that day it was enough. Months later, Eleanor finally moved Harold's cardigan from the dining room chair. She held it to her face, breathed in the last faint trace of him, and folded it into a cedar box with his letters. The brass key went beside it. The safe stayed unlocked. Inside she kept the evidence, not to punish them forever, but to make sure truth could not be politely misplaced again. On the first anniversary of Harold's death, Eleanor hosted dinner. This time the dining room table was full. Not healed. Full. There is a difference. Grant came quieter. Peter sent flowers but did not attend. Marianne came early and asked where Eleanor wanted the plates. Daniel brought a framed photograph. It held 2 pictures. One was Harold with 12-year-old Daniel, the photograph from the safe. The other was Eleanor in the kitchen doorway, holding the blue plate, smiling at something Mrs. Briggs had said. Daniel placed it on the sideboard. Eleanor touched the frame. Before anyone sat, she took the blue plate from the shelf and placed it at the center of the dining room table. No food on it, no decoration, just the plate. Chipped, plain, unashamed. The family looked at it and no one laughed. No one asked why an old kitchen plate belonged among polished silver. They understood. The most valuable thing in the Whitaker house had never been the house, the will, the accounts, or the name on the gate. It was the lesson they had nearly destroyed. A table means nothing if it welcomes people only after they have power. A family means nothing if it protects reputation better than it protects love. Eleanor took her place beside Harold's empty chair, not near the kitchen door, not by the sink, not at the edge, beside him. And when the meal began, no one reached for the first dish until she did. Some families do not show their cruelty with shouting. They show it with a chair removed from a table, a plate placed by a sink, a name changed on a funeral program, or a widow asked to wash dishes, while others divide the life of the man she loved. Eleanor's strength was not that she became louder than the people who hurt her. Her strength was that she refused to become the lie they needed her to be. Harold's family thought blood gave them the right to judge love they had not practiced. But love is not proven by inheritance. It is proven in hospital hallways, unpaid bills, quiet kitchens, hard nights, kept promises, and the way we treat the person everyone else thinks they can dismiss. So, here is the question. If you had been in that room, would you have spoken up when Eleanor was sent to the kitchen? Or would you have waited until the key proved she mattered? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you value stories about family betrayal, dignity, hidden truth, and quiet justice, subscribe and come back for the next story.